Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel, where it is time once again for second helping. This is almost like a third helping on a Wednesday night in early June. This time I mean it. Travis Reier
Mm.
alongside my great friend and co-host Brent Beaird. We have hooked up Brent. You know, you leave me to my own devices where some of this technology is concerned. You never know what you're going to get, but we're hooked up. It
That's
is
right.
late
That's right, my
night
man.
on a Wednesday on June the 4th. We are live. So if you'd like to jump in the comments or the show chat, feel free to do that. Brent, we've got SEC spring meetings on our way. We talked a lot about that last week. We're just kind of in a wait and see, kind of a holding pattern, it seems like, with a
Mhm.
lot of things that are going to be
Mhm.
very important to
Yeah.
college
Yeah.
football and college
Right.
athletics. It
Right.
just feels like we've been on this treadmill of, you know, the scenery hasn't changed a lot. So until we actually get some substance, more stuff to that, I thought we'd get a little more topical tonight because you know
Mhm.
what, Brent? With SEC spring meetings behind us, that means you know what is on the not too distant horizon.
Well, the um, credential requests actually were mailed by the SEC this week for the media day. So that's around the
There you
corner,
go.
with that too. And look, the other reality is these players, they are at school, they've
Yeah.
moved in, they are working out. Now, I tell you what, Trav, I do hope if we go to this OTA thing, I
Yeah.
think one of the real benefits of that would be is they would be with the coaches more, would they not?
They would, although some of these programs that have the resources, they had almost implemented the secondary coaching staffs where, you know, the strength and conditioning staffs had become filled out to the point where you almost had coaching staffs beyond the regular season coaching staff. But I'm with you. Yeah, I mean it's kind of the great facade of college football these days. You know, we can't have the coaches working with the players directly in the yes, we can. I
Yeah,
mean,
why
this
not?
is the veil of amateurism has really been ripped away. This is pro football.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, I'm with you. Hopefully that is something that could change. But you're right, man. Where the college football calendar is concerned, not that it really ever ends anymore,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
even before the portal and some of this stuff that's come into play, May was still pretty quiet. You
Yeah,
know, that
very.
when the
Yes.
recruiting calendar changed with the portal and visits moving to June, then you essentially just went with no off season at all. But prior to that, May would be kind of quiet, you
Mhm,
know, and
mhm,
even July
mhm.
to an extent. Those are pretty much gone out the window. But really, when I've thought about the college football calendar year, even in the last 10 or 15 years, it's been June 1st,
Sure,
because even if there
absolutely.
was that sort of interim break in May, as you just pointed out, everybody gets back together
Mhm,
after Memorial Day.
mhm.
And
Yes,
that's really when it
yes.
starts, because you truly have
Mhm.
at least what you think will be your football team for the upcoming season all together.
Yeah,
Because
yes.
you might have had early enrollees in
Mhm.
January, but you didn't have your summer enrollees there yet, or the portal arrivals that come, you know, after the late window. So yeah, it really is sort of that effect on college football teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're still getting information on TV times and things
Hmm.
of that nature, which is kind of fun to be able to see that. Athlon is in, and we got Lenny's coming in. Phil Steele will be here in July the 4th. That is going on also. So it is but if we could, and hopefully again, I know the House versus Nation thing has been delayed until the end of the month. So that and like you said, there's really nothing else to say about that at this point either. But we are at a just a time where the clock's ticking, and
Hmm.
I think people are getting excited. I know there's a lot of frustration when people they don't like NIL, they don't like some of the rules, and that they don't like the conference is going against each other and things like that. But hopefully, as we've talked several times this week, the game on the field saves us, Trav.
Oh
It
gosh.
has so far, and hopefully it will continue to do that.
Yeah, hopefully. Hey, Brian Kane checking in here in the show chat. We appreciate each and every one of you that jump on board. Brian says, don't get to join y'all as often as I want. When I can, it's the top of my list for insights and analysis, whatever the phase of the college football calendar. Thank you. No, thank you, Brian. We
Absolutely.
appreciate those kind words as we get going on a Wednesday night. And yeah, we are going to have SEC Media Days, not in Hoover, which I've said before, SEC Media Days anywhere other than Hoover is kind of like if you played the SEC football championship game and say like
Yeah.
College Park, Maryland or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Or like when we've had college football playoff games in Santa Clara, or
Mm-hmm.
places like that. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel right. Now, look, Clemson fans thought Santa Clara was great. I was there. I saw
Yeah.
what Clemson did to
Yeah.
Alabama that night. So I feel you if you're a Clemson fan, but
Mm-hmm.
you get the gist. And one of the things though, with the magazines out, kind of ramps up sort of the predictions. And we've seen
Mm-hmm.
things like the football power index from ESPN here in the last week, where the SEC, when you talk about spots 1 through 19 of that ranking,
Yeah.
boy, it is heavy with the Southeastern Conference, especially 10 through 19. But you've got Texas, you've got Georgia, you've got Alabama in the top four of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to ask you, Brent, about some of your thoughts on what we're going to see at SEC Media Days when it comes time to predicting preseason favorites. And we understand sometimes, or a lot of times, the media hadn't gotten it right
Yeah.
where the
True.
outright champion is concerned.
True.
I guess they got it right last year, though, with Georgia. I believe Georgia was the
Mm-hmm.
preseason favorite. I want to say Georgia, maybe, I don't know. But what do you think about this go around? Is it just going to be as simple as in some order Texas, Georgia, Alabama, or do you think there could be some discrepancies there?
I think there's always a chance for some discrepancies. I think Texas will probably be number one, and obviously with Arch Manning coming back, I get that Georgia will be very very close to them. I think Bama will be in the top four. Also, I think what's fascinating to a degree is they've got they're I think there'll be some that's going to have Florida on the cusp there at 5, 6, or 7, to where they could move up. Frankly, with that, um, uh, but I don't see A&M, OU, Tennessee ranked that high. Frankly, and look, everything, Trav, everything I've seen has got Auburn like 10 or below.
Oof.
And listen, it doesn't take reading between the lines on that one. If they end up like 11 or 12 in the league, uh, Trav, this time next year we'll be talking about the new Auburn coach in his first year.
Wow. Could be for sure. And that's why I think that Baylor game, as we've talked about, even right out the
Sure.
gate on that Friday night out in Waco, very, very important towards the tone, the morale, maybe of that
Mm-hmm.
program. Because
Yes.
you're going to get a couple of gimmies or what appear to be gimmies for
Yeah.
Auburn after that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you lose to Baylor, even if you win the next two and you're sitting there at 2-1, that fan base is going to be feeling pretty raw and salty, I would think,
Yeah.
at that point. Now, we talk about Texas, very interesting team, because when I think about a team with maybe the two or at least two of the toughest road games
Yeah.
in the conference for this upcoming
Mm-hmm.
season, I look at Texas because they go to Florida. And then what about mid November, a trip to Athens, Georgia?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
early, it's late
It
that
is.
Texas goes out there. So I do think otherwise, though, within the league, it works out pretty well for Texas. But if Florida takes that step so many people are expecting the Gators to take, that's not going to be an easy trip.
No. No.
And then
Listen.
certainly
Yeah.
Georgia, from a personnel perspective and playing on its home field, and the success we saw Georgia have against Texas a year
Yeah,
ago.
yes, yes. And listen, that's going to be, and Pop may be one of them, but that Texas game in Gainesville is going to be one of the biggest games they have had there in quite a while,
Long time.
as far as just pure hype. But look, my concern for Texas would be November, Vandy, Georgia, Arkansas, and A&M. Now, one thing that you and I've talked about for decades is the cumulative effect of the attrition that you go through in this conference,
Mhm.
and they should be favored to except for Georgia, to win all those games. But Trav, again, they lose what, a starter or two after every game.
Yeah,
By the time you get to November, that can be pretty dicey.
it can be. Something else Texas is going to have this year that it didn't have a year ago is a very formidable opener. When you talk about that road trip to Columbus
Yes.
to take on Ohio State. Now, again,
Mhm.
that doesn't impact things much from a conference perspective. Um, but yeah, I think with the Arch Manning hype and the expectations
Mhm.
for him to be a
Mhm.
top two or three
Oh yeah.
player at his position in all of the sport, and then how things kind of set up for the Longhorns, even beyond those road trips to Gainesville and Athens. I agree. I think it'll probably be Texas at the top. I like
Mhm.
Georgia from the perspective of it does get Alabama and Texas
Mhm.
in Athens,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
and
Absolutely.
now we can
Mhm.
talk about previous trips by Alabama to the state of Georgia to take on the Bulldogs and how those have gone in favor of the Alabama Crimson Tide. But those type of things seem to stack up well for Georgia. But I think in terms of just overall uh, difficulty, where the SEC slate is concerned, yeah, it helps to have those games at home, but still won't be easy for Georgia.
No, no, and they've got a lot of work to do. I mean, Gunnar Stockton's on the front of some magazines, but is Gunnar going to be the long-term quarterback for them? I think he will if he stays healthy. Now, we only got a small sample size, but he got in late in the season and was able to get a part of some really big games. But you and I've talked about this now for weeks, and I'm not sure I see enough on this yet with people talking at Trev until they get back to what they have been on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
I'm not now. Look, I'm not saying they're going to be 8-4 or anything like that, but until and until both those lines get fixed, that there will remain many questions for them.
There will. And I think it helps Georgia that if you're going with a first year starter at quarterback to Knoxville early in
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
season, like Georgia
yeah,
is this year, it doesn't hurt that Tennessee will be going with a first year starter
yeah,
at
yeah,
quarterback now
yeah.
with
Absolutely.
Nico moving on
Hmm.
to UCLA. Otherwise, I think from a conference perspective, it stacks up pretty nice for Georgia. You know what else you get at home? You get Ole Miss in
Yeah.
Athens. I mean,
Oh yeah.
so you think about viable candidates for Southeastern Conference championship candidates, and boy, you get Alabama, Texas at home, and even Ole Miss.
Hmm.
You're going to get in
Hmm.
Athens as well. Is Florida? Well, first let's talk about Alabama because they're in that group of three,
Yeah.
and I think roster wise, Alabama might be the most attractive of those three teams to me when I
Yeah.
just look
Yeah.
at the teams
I
on
agree.
paper. And in terms of which of these teams has gotten the best news in terms of returning players or departures where the transfer portal is concerned. Combine that with another stellar recruiting class for Alabama. Alabama feels more like that team. Now, look, Alabama's got to go to Athens, as we talked about. And, South Carolina is one of those road trips that probably
Yes.
won't be very easy for the Crimson Tide. Auburn has never been easy. And we can talk
Mm-mm.
about Auburn
No.
as perhaps
No.
teetering on the brink of another coaching change. But when Thanksgiving weekend rolls around, that will still be, regardless, a scary proposition for Kalen DeBoer going down to the Plains for the first time. But again, when I look at Alabama structurally
Hmm.
as a roster, as a football team, um, in terms of what it's been able to sustain and what it's added, um, yeah, it's a team that very definitely should be in the mix for an SEC championship.
Yeah, maybe as many as 9 coming back on defense, in a defense that certainly really improved. They got some guys healthy, which is a big help with that. Their wide receivers, I've seen them in the top 5
Yeah.
of the best wide receivers, certainly in the nation. Simpson's got a small sample size too. That Bama Georgia game. You've got 2 quarterbacks that haven't played much, frankly. So that'll be an interesting storyline with that. But will that line be better, Trav? And what will and they've got good backs, but will they be able to run the ball?
Yeah, that's that. Or will they commit to running the ball? I still don't
True.
think Alabama's going to be a team that's under Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb that's going to say, look, we're going to line up and run it 40 times a week.
Yeah.
That's just
Right.
not who they
No.
are. That's not the offense
Mm-mm.
that's in Tuscaloosa now. What I do think is this: I think they'll be able to complement the run game with the quick passing game better than they
Yes.
did a year ago.
Yes.
Again, you're not going to have Derrick Henry with 395 carries in 2015. That's not going to happen at Alabama. But you could have Jam Miller with a couple hundred
Mhm.
carries, and then with Ty Simpson in there, perhaps an upgrade where the quick game is concerned, getting the ball out quickly to the perimeter. Get it to Ryan Williams and give him a chance after the catch in space. And he's not the only guy that they're going to
No.
have that you're going to want to try to do that with. So I think that's something to keep an eye on when you think about something other than just the traditional passing game with Ty Simpson and those talented receivers he's going to have. The offensive line's getting a lot of preseason love. My answer to that has been great. Let's see it. You know, I think
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
Alabama in year 2 under Kalen DeBoer is team prove it. You know what I mean? Like you're
Yes.
hearing all these
Yes.
things about Alabama, and most of it's very positive, and I get that. But I think there's a large faction of that fan base that's like, yeah, that's great. Now let's see it. Let's actually put it on tape, Brent.
Well, the prove it part to me, Travis, is and this happened to them obviously in the losses they had last year. It could easily be argued, and look, I know the inconsistency at quarterback with Jalen Milrow, and I get all that, but the disturbing thing that they showed a couple of times last year, they just weren't not at all ready to play.
Against 6-win teams.
Yeah,
Alabama's
yeah,
season wasn't lost to Tennessee, or those kind of teams. Alabama's season went down the drain against 6-win Vanderbilt,
yes,
against 6-win
yes.
Oklahoma. Those are the games and the teams, not the Tennessees on the schedules,
No.
but the teams that Alabama fans have grown so accustomed to not only beating, but beating by
Yeah,
40 plus.
yeah, right. Oh yeah.
So
And one of the more interesting things for them, could they really? I mean, they've got the talent with these wide receivers. What, Trav? Could they really make a statement in the kicking game this year in that return game? Obviously, field goal kicker will be interesting. But
yeah,
I'm just wondering with this kind of talent on kickoff and punt returns, could and I'm not talking about scoring on every time that they get the opportunity, but I mean, can you get the ball to the 40-yard line on a
depends
consistent
depends
basis?
on depends on what you want to do with Ryan Williams. I think where
Yeah,
a lot of that is concerned. Do you want to put him back there on punts?
yeah, really
Some
good
coaches are
question.
adverse to that. Some are
Hmm.
like, hey, it counts as a touch. It's no
Yeah,
different than if we throw it to him out in the flat and try to
absolutely.
let him do his thing in space. Kind of a punt returns the same thing. Kickoff returns. Can a guy like Jalen Mbakwe in his
Hmm.
second year
Hmm.
maybe at least impact that? Because
Sure.
really, after moving to wide receiver, in the spring, we didn't really hear all that much about
Mhm.
Jalen Mbakwe as a
Mhm.
receiver after going over
Yeah.
there, maybe as a return specialist. I think what you just said maybe is where the concerns for Alabama from a personnel perspective are not being talked about enough. Punter, place
Yeah.
kicker,
Right. Right.
even the long snapper, Nealon Hibbett,
Mhm.
has moved on to the NFL. So it's a good situation to be in if you're the Alabama Crimson Tide, and it's certainly not going to do anything to sort of quell expectations in year two under Kalen DeBoer. So when we think about that next tier, like Tennessee, LSU, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, um, and then the Florida Gators. Very,
Mhm.
very interesting. But man, when I go, when I still go through Florida's schedule, as tough as it was last year,
Oh, yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
you go to LSU in week 3. Okay, you kind
Mhm.
of ease into things. You should be fine week 1,
Yeah.
week 2,
Yeah.
but then you go to LSU in week 3. Then you go to Miami in week 4. You get a bye week. Then you
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
Texas in Gainesville. Then the week after Texas, you go to Texas A&M. So you talk about a 4-game stretch
Oh, yeah.
before
Yeah.
you really get
Absolutely.
to mid-October. You go LSU on the road, Miami on the road, Texas at home, A&M on the road. 3 out of 4 on the road, and you do have a bye week, but boy, you talk about a defining stretch before you hit, like I said, mid-October. That's it for the Florida Gators.
And then then if you survive that, you've got the challenges in November with the Georgia game being here for the last time, and that we'll see that game in a couple of years.
Go to
So you
Tampa
got
and
Georgia.
Atlanta. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. You got Trev. You got Georgia and Kentucky, and it could be November the 8th. I mean, it could be 45 degrees in Kentucky during that time. Then you go to Ole Miss and Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rugged, man, for Billy Napier. I know what I like about Florida is it's not just DJ Lagway. Like
That's correct.
Florida, for the
Correct.
first time, I feel like in a number of years, is legitimately built to withstand a lot of that. And when I
Yes.
say that, I'm
Yes.
talking about offensive line, defensive line. Got some war daddies on that defensive line, and
Mhm.
offensively expected to be one of the better groups along with Alabama in all of college football when you're thinking about that offensive line. What about the LSU Tigers and all of this, Brent? And we talk about sort of stretches of a season that are going to tell us a lot about a football team. And I think it's set up pretty well for LSU. Now, obviously you go to Clemson to get things started on a
Yeah.
Saturday night, Labor Day weekend, and then you get Florida at home on September the 13th. You go to Ole Miss on September the 27th, but you get a bye week before you host South Carolina, which
Hmm.
could be a sneaky big game. And then between Texas A&M and Alabama in late October, early November, you get another bye week. So it doesn't lay out all that poorly for Brian Kelly's team to be
Hmm.
something more than just 6th or 5th in the league this time around.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, that there are just no excuses for them. That they've got the talent. I mean, listen, I mean, Aaron Anderson, who's transferred from Alabama, to me, Barry and Brown could be their biggest weapon
Hmm.
in returning kicks. Also, Nick Anderson coming over from Oklahoma. I mean, they've got as good a receivers as anybody does. I mean, I think we both really like Garrett Nussmeier and what he can do. Caden Durham is a really capable back.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, when you lose your two best offensive linemen to the NFL, you don't get over that real quick. But I mean, this could be the year, particularly on defense. If Harold Perkins, if they ever figure that out, that's one of the great mysteries to me. There is why he's not playing better and why they haven't really figured out where to line him up yet.
Very interesting. Another team that you are intrigued by are the Ole Miss Rebels,
Oh yeah.
because that had the feeling, especially down the stretch of last season, of a culmination of what Lane Kiffin had been pointing towards, especially with Jackson
Mhm.
Dart at the quarterback position and all the work they had done in the portal. That looked like a college football playoff team, especially after the win over Georgia.
Absolutely, it did.
Later in the season,
Mhm.
to win convincingly on the second Saturday in November over the Georgia Bulldogs. But then, even after a bye week, to turn around and have that disappointing loss at Florida, um, on November the 23rd, I still wonder how Ole Miss will respond to all that. In some ways, I think it's
Yeah,
maybe not the worst thing that they are transitioning at quarterback from a longtime starter to a promising young talent. Maybe some freshness isn't the worst thing for the Ole
right.
Miss Rebels.
Yeah, still like this defense, what Lane has done with these guys. They don't return a lot of guys, but I mean, Centurion Perkins is tremendous. Donnery is, but both those linebackers, Prince Will you, I think is going to be impressive for them as a Havian Harris too. So I mean, they're going to be in very good shape, frankly, a lot of way. And for their travel, their schedule, Georgia State at Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane, and they really do, and I'm not being disparaging of these other teams, but they really don't play anybody till they get LSU the last Saturday in September.
I don't know if a lot of people understand that Ole Miss is hosting Washington State on October the 11th.
Really,
That's crazy.
it
I
is.
mean,
Isn't it?
I understand Washington State's in a different place than it was even
Yeah,
a couple of years ago with the
right.
Pac-12, but
Yeah, yeah,
that's an interesting spot for
sure it is.
a game like that. And
Oh
look, you don't
yeah,
have to worry about John Mateer, at least not in that one. Now you'll have to
no,
worry about him 2 weeks later
yeah,
when you
that's
go to
right.
Norman. You miss Mateer in Oxford on
Mhm.
October the 11th, but then you'll see him, you would think, if everything goes according to plan, the Washington State transfer at quarterback for OU
Mhm. Oh
on
yeah.
October the 25th. So, Brent, Tennessee, I guess, in that mix still, or are
Mhm.
they? How big a hit is that with Nico moving on to their chances, in your opinion? And South Carolina, I can't quite get my arms around yet. I
I
don't
agree.
I don't
I
know if
agree.
I'm really ready to go in. It's not because I think Lenore Sellers is going to have a drop off. Um, that South Carolina just feels like one of those teams that every few years they're going to get on a roll, but then if they finish the season strong, because we saw this a couple of years ago, and then they had a
Mhm.
disappointing 20, I guess it was 2023, maybe. Remember 2022?
Yes,
They did a
yeah,
lot of the things they did to
sure
finish
did.
2024, and then
Mhm.
2023 wasn't the year. So will 2025 kind of be that type of situation from a couple of years ago for South Carolina, or will they be able to sustain it for a second season in a row under under Beamer?
I still think they really need to develop, and I think they're better, but they really need to develop that vertical passing game. Nick Harbor's a guy who could really help them.
Yeah.
Luke Doty is still there. He's a wide receiver. Luke's played about every position,
He came
but
in with, I think, Sterling Sharp
yeah,
back
probably. Yeah,
83 or
I
so.
agree. Yeah, absolutely. So, and Old Dominion at Kentucky, I'm sorry, Virginia Tech, South Carolina State, Vandy at Missouri, Kentucky, and they've got. I mean, you could argue they may not be challenged until they go to LSU in the middle of October
Yeah.
for South Carolina.
It sets up nicely from a schedule perspective. Tennessee is going to be fascinating
They
because
are. They
of
really are.
the tumultuous offseason where it relates to the most important position on the field. And then to open against a really solid and emerging Syracuse program,
Yeah.
re-emerging program
Yeah.
in
Yes.
Syracuse. Been a proud program in the past. So you get Syracuse on August the 30th, East Tennessee State the following Saturday, and then you get the Georgia Bulldogs in Knoxville on
Mm.
September the 13th. I think after that 3 game stretch, I think we're going to have a pretty good idea about Tennessee in 2025.
This is crazy. but I'm not sure Aguilar may not be better for them, frankly, than Nico was.
Yeah.
Hopefully Nico would get it together, in his career. But Aguilar was at App State, had two pretty good years. I get that he was at App State, but when you've got, like 3,000 or so yards, you're doing something right. I mean, obviously, they've got to get things better at running back and on the defensive line. I'll talk about this until the season starts, and until they're able to find success in the running game and that front seven on defense, they can replace some of those guys like
Yeah.
Pierce who went to the NFL.
Couple of
I think
NFL guys. Yeah.
I think a lot of the things we've seen so far, Trev, think will take a step backwards.
Yeah. Pretty much a quarterback driven football team when you're
Yes.
thinking about Josh Heupel and that offense, not even so much in terms of statistical production, but how that thing has to be managed with the tempo and the way they
Mhm.
like to play.
Mhm.
You've got to have the right guy behind center, no doubt about that. So, Brent, as we get out of here, I notice here in your notes, we've got the 2026 College Football Hall of Fame ballot that is out. Really fun to kind of go through
It
the
is.
names because some we haven't really thought about all that much in a
I
number of
agree.
years, like Alex Brown, who was an absolute terror as an edge defender for the Florida Gators going back
Man.
25, almost 30 years ago now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also because with Oklahoma and Texas coming into the league, when you incorporate SEC guys on these lists, you see a Rocky Calmus, the former Oklahoma linebacker, was a really, really good player on those Bob Stoops teams all those years ago. Randall Cobb, the outstanding utility knife type player for the Kentucky Wildcats, probably best known as a Green Bay Packer with
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
I think Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, he spanned. Randall Cobb did up there in Green Bay. Brad Culpepper, the Florida defensive lineman who played in the National Football League, I transitioned into a tremendous career as an agent. Brad
Yeah.
Culpepper did. Alan Faneca, the outstanding offensive lineman from LSU. Boy, the list just goes on and on. Some of the names, again, you're synonymous with college football in the
Mhm.
last quarter century. Mark Ingram, Cam Newton. So, I mean, the Heisman Trophy winners are there, but then some really, really good players that maybe we hadn't thought about all that much.
Look, and you've got a guy like Percy Harvin,
Oh gosh,
who was just in a Trav, was just in a category by himself.
electrifying.
You know,
He would get those migraine headaches. Remember
yeah.
that?
Oh yes.
And they were
Oh yes.
debilitating. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Yeah.
he missed
Absolutely.
some important games, I think, with that during his Florida career.
But
Yeah.
yeah, when he was healthy though, and look, he was a terror in practice, I understand in many ways.
Hell when he
But
was well, as they
he
say.
was, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah.
Listen, help me on this. I love Randall Cobb. People really need to go back and see how good Cobb was. Trav, wasn't Cobb the quarterback when Kentucky upset one of the better LSU
I
teams?
think he played some quarterback, yeah, at Kentucky. He did everything. When I
He
said
really did.
Swiss Army knife, that was Randall Cobb. He could do it all.
Oh
Anything, any
yeah.
phase of the game, he could do it. And then you got guys on here too, like D'Amico Ryans, the former Alabama linebacker. I don't
Yes.
think people
Yes.
realize how great a college player he was.
True.
And not only that,
True.
just personified student athlete to the to a T. And now the head coach, of
Yeah.
course, of the Houston Texans is D'Amico Ryan. So it's sort of fun to go down memory lane, as I said, because some of these guys we haven't talked about in years, but great, great football players. Garrison Hurst, heck of
Yes.
a running back
Mhm.
for the Georgia Bulldogs. So many years ago. Josh Heupel's on here as a player,
That's
former
right.
Oklahoma quarterback, national
Oh yeah.
champion. So
Yeah.
of course, Cam Newton, just an all-timer, top 3 or 4 all-time
Oh,
college
oh, yeah.
football player in the
Yes.
history of the sport. So, yeah, I enjoy that. It's a little nostalgia there, Brent.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating to look at the coaches here. And the number one, I am a big Mike Leach fan, and what they did. Now he won't go in with this class.
Right.
He'll be the 2027 class. But I'm delighted to see that. But Trev, two names in SEC football with Dennis Franchione and Tommy Tuberville.
Those are interesting.
Yes, that are very interesting. I look.
Now Tommy did have that one season with Auburn where there was the controversy about the national
Yes.
champ. What is it, 03?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
was it
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
03 team?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Southern Cal was involved with all that too.
Yeah, yeah. He had Ronnie Brown and Cadillac, I
Yes,
want to say,
yeah,
at Ole
they could have
Miss.
ran a wishbone that year, Trav.
Yeah. And I don't get Fran being on here, but hey, Fran, when he went to A&M, didn't he give up like 77 to Oklahoma in
Yeah,
a game? I mean, that
yeah,
should be automatic DQ. If you give up
on
70, you're
yeah,
DQ.
yeah, Trav, on any given night, on Twitter, someone will flash that scoreboard up there from time to time. I will never forget an Alabama beat writer uh, who said Dennis Franchione, when he was at Alabama, from, he said from Sunday through Friday night was one of the better coaches in the country, and then you got on Saturday, and that's where the questioning was.
I attended a couple of Bama games when Fran was a head coach that were just both ends of the spectrum.
Yes,
I
yeah,
think it was 2001, and Lou Holtz was at South Carolina, and Alabama went to Columbia,
yeah, yes,
and with Tyler Watts just ran sort of that option offense that
correct,
Fran, and it was beautiful to watch when it was right. It
yes,
was, and just blew a big lead at South Carolina and lost one of those early kickoffs at Williams-Brice Stadium. I remember that one. But then a year later, I went to Baton Rouge and I
hmm,
watched Alabama just tattoo Nick Saban
yeah,
and LSU with Dennis Franchione. So it didn't seem like there was much middle ground with Fran. It was
no,
either great, great,
no,
great, or it was not so great. I mean, there were, like I said, there were those kind of performances. Uh, I saw Alabama in probably '02 just slack. I want to say Ole Miss in
hmm,
Tuscaloosa,
hmm,
and then lay an egg at home in an Iron
yeah,
Bowl
oh
against
yeah,
Auburn a year after beating Auburn on the road.
yeah, and
I mean,
that was
it was all over the place with Frank. You just didn't
that's
know,
right.
you know.
Trev, I thought one of his biggest wins, I think, is the one you're talking about. They went to Auburn, and Auburn thought that
Yeah,
help me
31 to
on this.
7.
Yeah,
I mean,
that Tyler Watts was going to be the quarterback, and they were going to run the
no,
ball the whole game. And instead threw the ball all over the field, and it
yeah.
was like what 31-7 or something like
One
that.
of the best games of Fran's short time at Alabama I saw that I attended, the Alabama Georgia game doesn't get talked about in 2002. That was a heck of a
Yeah,
game in
yeah.
Tuscaloosa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Came down to a field goal late, and Georgia was able to get the W. But
yes,
yeah, I mean, Fran, when he was engaged
yes,
and
yes.
locked in and committed and
Mhm.
really into it, good coach. But
Yeah.
it just no middle ground. It didn't
No,
seem
and
like
then
with Fran.
and then they lost. You remember this, that when he was flirting with A&M,
Yeah.
they I don't think they did hardly anything the week of the Auburn game.
Yeah, that was that Iron Bowl in '02.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yes, where they could not do anything. And Trav, you've got maybe the future governor of the state of Alabama, Tommy Tuberville, at Ole Miss, and that and Alabama fans still wake up sweating sometimes with Tommy holding up six fingers, don't they?
Tommy, he caught Alabama at a good time during
He
that
did,
stretch,
didn't he? He
Caught
did.
Mike Shula,
Yes.
I think he caught some tail into Dubose.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. He did. Yes.
Speaking of tail end, he never saw Mike Price. Um, he saw Fran,
Yeah.
and then,
Yeah.
he got Nick that one that in
Mhm.
'07, and
Mhm.
then Nick hammered him in
Yeah.
'08, and that was
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
It
Yeah.
was all off
Absolutely.
the politics for Tommy. So
It
yeah,
was.
it's a lot of fun kind of going down memory lane. Brent, anything else before we get out of here late night on a Wednesday?
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate folks listening. There'll be a lot more going on over the next few weeks. Hopefully, we're going to get some decisions. Do we go to eight, stay at eight, or do we go to nine? Do we go to 16? I think a lot of that, Trav. I think this is one of those seasons people will be so happy just to get the games,
Oh,
particularly if there are decisions made
last
about
week.
these big factors that they won't know what to do.
Yeah, that was me last week. That's me every week. But
Yeah,
after all the talk in Sandestin, I was like, oh, geez, can we just get some games eventually?
yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah.
It'll make you appreciate it even more. That's the way you got to look at it.
That's
You
right.
already love college football. You'll appreciate it even more after
Yes,
this
yes.
off season. Brent, as always, a lot of fun. Look forward to doing it again real soon.
Good. Can't wait, bud. Take care. Have a great week.
Yeah, and thanks to each and every one of you tuned in live. And of course, the show will archive right there on Reier on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to Reier on YouTube as of yet, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to all of our content as it drops here on the channel. And if you would hit us with a like, we would appreciate that. A thumbs up would be great as well. For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you. And until next time, so long, everybody.